going to be the moderator for this panel. So we've heard a lot about relevant community issues and potential solutions and how youth can get involved, which have been super valuable conversations. But something else I feel like we need to talk about is how to actually make these changes happen, especially in the policy sphere, and how to advocate for policy change and influence decision makers. So I'm going to hand it off to our wonderful speakers here to give them a brief opportunity to introduce themselves, as well as talk a little bit about their experience with this topic and any insights they might have. Woo!
Okay, thank you Dara for the introductions. So my name is Cornelis. I am not from here. I came from Indonesia. And I've been starting my early career as an activist prior to my college. So I've been working with government under National Counterterrorism Agency for 2 years. And then I'm an ambassador. So we are working to navigate young people to prevent radicalisms and promote the national movement in Indonesia. And after doing my college, I also involved in Asian Youth Interfaith Games. So it's a regional organizations established by our country, Indonesia, to promote the inclusivity in our regional scale. And then currently, I'm an active state attorney or prosecutor in Indonesia. And that's my introduction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cornelis. We're so happy to have you here, and let's hand it over to Jaewon.
Thank you very much. My name is Jaewon. I'm coming from Massachusetts today, and I serve as the Executive Director of the DMU Foundation. We are a youth-led international nonprofit that teaches young people about political advocacy and international relations, especially in the multilateral space. So as you can guess by the name of our foundation, we operate the world's largest virtual Muslim UN conference. And we also operate a global youth delegations program where we nominate young leaders to attend a variety of intergovernmental United Nations, UN system meetings and bodies to represent the foundation, their local communities, and young people. So my experience here is concentrated at the more of international and multilateral context of youth advocacy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming. And for this panel, we will be having a dialogue with the speakers first, and then I'm planning on opening it up to audience questions. So, starting off, what are some of the most effective ways that you found to advocate for policy change on both local or larger scales? And I'd love to hear some examples or stories of that.
Okay, that was great, Jaya. So, what I can say here that I've been working in Indonesia for 3 years. So there are difference of governmental systems. So you go here in as a federal, but we are kind of like presidential systems. So what I'm thinking when I start doing my my movement in college. So there is a challenge that we face actually. First of all, the financial challenge we cannot fund by ourselves. So one of the best things. So I'm gonna tell like more in practical way. So we need collaborations, right? So when I try to engage with the larger NGOs, so basically I met with the founder of the NGO, and then we talk about there. So just to like same perspective on the issue, and I conclude that okay, we can start collaborating. So that's the main gate for me, like when I start to running my NGO. Furthermore, then we need to collaborate also with the legislative members. So if you know that like every legislative assembly, so they have like kind of divisions there. Whether this kind of their political affiliations, like they have some sort of commissions. So like commission that deal with environment or youth engagement or also energy and that kind of stuff. So I think it's better for you to collaborate with them individually and then try to communicate with them So I think that's the most possible way you can do it.
Absolutely, that's super valuable, those commissions for sure. Javon, what do you have to say?
Well, I think for youth advocacy, there's always a need and a want. This is especially true for multilateralism. For instance, when young people and youth organizations are invited to address, several bodies of the United Nations or such, the implicit association is that those secretariats, they want to sort of tokenize youth. But as young people, we also want to deliver our salient points and recommendations there. And so to do effective advocacy, you have to balance between those two sides, those needs and the wants that each different parties have. And so I think the way we approach this is to just think about these different needs, right? What is the main priority I want to provide in that body? What is the way that we can advocate effectively while respecting all the procedures and the other mechanisms built for participation? But also at times it's about bending the rules a bit. I've little experience here with that. So there's a conference coming up in Seville by the United Nations called the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. And there's preparatory committees held in New York before that. And so we had the opportunity to send some young people, including myself, to a multi-stakeholder hearing held at that period. But fun fact, while the website welcomed youth participation, to actually register, there was a minimum age requirement. So what did I do? Because I was under that age requirement at the time. So I realized the registration form just asks you to click a checkbox that asks, I am above the minimum age requirement, but they never actually asked for your age. So what did I do? I, of course, just registered, went there, and actually revealed my age when I was doing a speech there. And guess what happened? They removed that minimum age limit.
Yes, absolutely. It makes sense to gauge whether the systems in place are, relevant to what needs to happen. Cornelis, you touched on something that I was actually going to bring up. What do you think are the biggest challenges faced when advocating, and how can you address them?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, it's the financial challenges, but I agree with Jay on that. I think we have, huge opportunity to participate in international conferences that, we have something kind of like that in Indonesia. Like we are kind of focused on our regional youth movements, but also when we think about the challenge, it's also financial. We cannot finance ourselves. We need sponsor. We need like governmental sponsor, for example. So that's the challenge, because I've been working both in the government and also as an independent. I co-found Eco-Catalyst ID, which is separate. So I've been working as a state attorney. But prior to that job, I co-founded Intergenerational. So those are different, different roles. So I fully understand what's happening there. So, as I mentioned before, that with collaborations, each NGO, you can approach a larger NGO, but also we can submit proposals to our representative in UN, right? Have permanent representative there, and do like mutual or dialogue. So it's not all about money, right? So it's all about resources. Like what I did before, funding or Eco-Catalyst, I tried to collaborate with the NGO, one of the biggest NGO in Indonesia, and I tried to approach him and, okay, we don't need money, we all need resources. We need trees, we need land, we need paper, we need pencil. So that's what I need, right? It's not about money. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I agree with my good friend Cornelius here that the financial challenges, especially for youth organizations, are really severe. And I think one of the reasons is that we don't have that authority, and also because of that implicit ageism some donors have. right? Because we have to justify our value, our ability, our integrity, and history to these donors. Why do they want to spend their hard-earned money to a My Foundation? And for us as young people, it's hard. We don't have decades of experience in that sector. And while we are officially registered as a nonprofit, we don't have a long history as many others nonprofit organizations that have been established like centuries ago. And so we need money to operate. I mean, there's a fundamental axiom for any of us to operate and to create change. And so I think it also requires a lot of outreach. It took me multiple months of cold emailing companies, visiting companies, applying for grants for my foundation to have received its first, funding. And as we sort of built that authority, as we built our value and expertise one by one, I think that financial situation sort of becomes alleviated. But I would still admit there is still an ongoing presence of that challenge.
Absolutely, and I think that also ties into something that was mentioned in earlier panels about the difficulties of fundraising and also community outreach and engagement. So that's a super pressing issue to keep in mind in these, in trying to make a difference and advocate for policy change. So, Jay, something you mentioned was the ageism that's prevalent, but do you think that intergenerational dialogue and alliances are essential to facilitating policy change? And then if so, what steps do you think should be taken to address the ageism and just form better partnerships throughout different generations? You can start and then Cornelius can also interject.
Thank you. Well, I think it's not just about intergenerational dialogue that's essential. It's intergenerational partnerships and collaboration. I want to refer back to my previous point on need and want. Like, as young people, we want to involve ourselves into that policy sphere, that sphere of governments, international organizations, and policy. But that is our want. But who has that? That's generally people of, older age, existing mechanisms, politicians, diplomats, large NGOs. And so if we are able to create collaboration between the two that are actually meaningful and effective, then we get our respective needs and wants all fulfilled. And to your second question about how we can improve that, I think we have to review the existing people in positions of power need to review. Is our platforms and mechanisms for stakeholder involvement actually accessible? Because there are many cases where they just don't consider the participation of young people. They never imagined it. And so when you actually try to register for a conference or to participate, you realize either you can't because of the minimum age limit, or there's other barriers to it. I think those are just unintentional because they lack the precedent of that such participation. But I still think we should review and ensure that it's fully accessible. Then we will have true intergenerational collaboration, partnership, and dialogue.
Absolutely, that's very valuable insight. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's do that around of applause.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that dialogue is one of the tools that we can communicate, we can submit our aspirations to our representative or our government, right? But we need to assess first how impactful the dialogue is. First, we need to set our target. So who will we speak, right? Whether it's our representative in government, legislative, or we can reach out to our our international representative like the UN. And then I think that's one of the big challenges that we have about ages. Like, we are young, means that we're not having capacity, but fortunately, in my country, Indonesia, there's an explosion of youth participation in politics. It's about 10% of our current parliament members, millennials. So that's really great news for me. So because we have something in common, we don't need, for example, for the budget efficiency, we, technically not hire an expert to understand or define with youth how, youth perspective on that. So because we have our, people in the parliament, so it's very easy to, to communicate with the public.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I do have more questions for both of you, but I also would love to open it up to the audience, and including the online audience. If anyone has any questions for these distinguished speakers, we can pass them around. Any questions? Any online questions as well?
I have the microphone. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to know the name of your organization was again. I didn't catch it.
Yes, DMUN Foundation.
Thank you. That's EMUN?
No,
D.
I think.
D as in Delta.
There was also an online question.
Perfect. Okay, so we do have an online question. What examples show successful youth influence on national or global policies, and how does youth participation differ between democracies and other systems?
Well, thank you. So I want to address, first of all, with the example. I would admit that my organization doesn't specialize in national advocacy, but rather international advocacy. But I think one of the things I find most impactful is the Rio Summit that happened a few decades ago from now. The critical points of the Rio Summit was establishing something called major groups and other stakeholders, MGOS. If you are experienced in that United Nations, these are stakeholder groups that represent certain stakeholders. There's a major group for children and youth, one for farmers, business and enterprise, vice versa. But because the Rio conference established that young people actually have a platform to deliver their voices and inputs, while it isn't perfect, before the Rio Summit, there wasn't any mechanism or system. So I found that example particularly meaningful. To your second question about that difference in the participation of young people between democracies and other systems, I think the main factor is not the ideology of how a country governs, but their willingness to hear inputs from the people. Right? Maybe it's not existing systems of elections or such, but if there is a proper mechanism to hear the voices of young people, I think that's what makes the most impact. Because I am a citizen of the Republic of Korea, which is a democratic country, but I would admit we don't have a government that listens actively to young people. So I don't think this is a question of ideology, but are the respective leaders, politicians, these other stakeholders that hold power, are they willing to hear from us and actually reflect that to their policy?
Absolutely. Cornelis?
Okay, yeah, that's. I have an example where, like 3 years ago, when I started following my NGO, Eco Catalyst, that it's kind of a difficult time for me before, I tried to prevent any like conflict of interest because I'm serving as a state attorney. But prior to that job, it's really challenging, to say that we're successful, with our agenda to our government. So we start in a small scale. So I live in a small town called Tomohon, North Sulawesi province in Indonesia. So we have something with the environment problem there. And then I tried to engage with the government. So I asked them, can we make discussions, like roundtable discussion? And then some journalists also, and university members, like some professors, so I invite there. And unfortunately, I don't need to spend money for that. Like, okay, it's a good intention to do. And then also, I am also invite with the local community there. And it's such a nice discussions. So there are some topics that I haven't heard before. The problems come up, and then okay, we need to solve the problem here in the table. And then what I drive the conversation is that at the end of our meeting, the journalists published the findings, and then they were agreed to make resolutions. And then that's really, it's like a small portion, of my achievement, but also like hard work for everyone. And then, yeah, we successfully address the issues, and it's like controversial issues. Yeah, I didn't spend any money, any dollars to that. It comes naturally. So all we need to do as a youth, I think we can engage, we can drive, because we have energy, they don't pay us because we don't expect for money. We are not kind of like regular worker. So that's something that I believe that every youth has. It's not about money because we have our energy, we have our potentials, and it's an assets, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great call to action, to be motivated by passion as well. I think that's super valuable. I saw a question back there. Okay. Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Any other questions in the audience or online? No? Okay, that's okay. I do have another question for you guys. We touched on some of the issues. Oh, is that what you okay. One of these, or a question is it important that we learn about the opposite government system?
Well, so we live in a very globalized world, right? And so I think an aspect of that globalization is we interact with people with different experiences, different identities, and who come from different countries. And so I think it is very important that we learn about those different systems of government, because often we are very much influenced by what we see in social media and other types of media outlets. And often, some of them create very fragmented and biased perspectives on several systems of governments and several countries or so. But my principle is that we need to be informed enough to not take everything we perceive at face value, but we can think about it and use our own experiences, reason, and other types of knowledge to determine our perspective on that. So if we know enough about those different types of governance that we necessarily don't experience in our own countries, I think we develop a very balanced and multifaceted perspective that allows us to actually dive deeper into a variety of modern contemporary social issues, political situations, and conflicts that we often see.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to talk about the opposite government. So, the close example, like within ourselves, we sometimes feel there's something restricted in our heart, like there's a uncertainty. So even in a family scale, sometimes we get like a problem with our spouse or our family. So it is normal, it is undeniable. Happen. So, but in larger scale, if you're working in a government or in an NGO, we need to be ready to face the opposition from people or for those who disagree with our agenda. So what I'm trying to propose here is that we need to be ready, like how the way we advocate, we need to be clear to our target, to the people. So like to minimize the misconception of topics or what we are telling to the people. And also, yeah, when we try to make it clear and also to maximize the collaborations, I think it will reduce the sense of oppositions. The people, like, even we can also engage with the government. We have some backups from both the legislative or the executive. But yeah, we need to be ready for the oppositions, I guess.
For sure. For sure. And yes, I think it's very valuable, both of you touched on this, to consider others with different perspectives in when you're trying to make change, just because there's so many people in the world, and all of us are coming from different backgrounds, and it's very valuable to consider other people's lived experiences and what their worldview might be like. Okay, so I have one last question for both of you. So we touched on some of the challenges to advocating for change and influencing decision makers. And we recognize that this is a difficult endeavor for a lot of youth who today might not feel like their voices are being heard, or like Jaywan said, feel potentially barred from some of these spheres. So what has helped you to get to where you are, and what advice do you have for those trying to get involved and make things happen?
Okay, so I think it's all about motivation, right? What motivates me or us to doing some voluntary actions, I guess. So something that drives from our inner self. So we're technically, we were for something that we are feeling like a desire. We need to do something, right? So that something that drives us from inside. It's not about like you get paid or money, but something that you make you feel you're happy for doing that. So I think that's one of the key, because I also started this journey early when I was high school. So it drives my mind, you know, whether I get involved in organization or I'm feeling happy meeting people, you like chit chat and you're doing like some voluntary action, and it keeps growing up when I get to college, like more larger action, like in a city, or when I represent my country, Indonesia, as a peace ambassador in ASEAN. So we try to engage. Like I also address this question, like what motivates all the people who are doing that. So we have something in common, right? So it's, I cannot define what it is, but it is something as like a gift for us as individual or coming here. Also, all the participants, we have something in common. There's something that drives us to be here.
Yes, for sure. And we're fortunate to be here and have that driving motivator in common that allows us to do what we do. Jaywan, would you like to add?
Well, I think when I always speak in a panel, I always like to end with that message of hope. And I think today, as we know many things that we don't want are happening in this world, we have to always consider hope. I think, personally, hope is the greatest yet the simplest act of opposition, of a rebellion one could do. It's free, anyone can do it. Any young people, wherever you are, if you have hope for a change, hope for a better future, that leads you to places. Did I ever know when I started that first Model UN conference a couple of years ago that I would be here or I do advocacy work in the UN? I did not know. All I had was a computer and hope that I could do something as a young person. And that led me to different opportunities, to different realizations. And so I would say another advice I would give is to have that resilience. Because things do not change as quickly as we want to. And so I have no idea if the change I make will actually be implemented in this lifetime. But I think I have that sense of resilience in knowing that I at least tried something. I was an active member of this society that we call home, and I tried to make a better society of it, and perhaps that would give benefit to the generation of the tomorrow, maybe my generation. And I think finally, it's to always understand that you have the tools, you have the opportunity. I want to segue back to the previous analogy I made about my age. If I could do all of this right now as a 15-year-old, there should be no limit to what any youth or anyone in this world could accomplish. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both so much. I will open it up for any last minute questions, either in person or online. Yes.
Okay, so yes, DMUN Foundation hosts a youth representative program every year, and in this October, I think we have again. So, what is the main topics this year the youth want to learn there?
Well, I think, first of all, our new representative program is a program that sends young people to different UN conferences and other multilateral bodies. And so it depends, I think, to your answer. It depends on the conference and the type of body that we send people with. For instance, early this April, we sent young people to the World Bank IMF annual spring meetings. In that platform, our youth representatives advocated for financial justice, tax justice, international aid, and those topics. But for another program where we're sending people to the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development in Geneva, it would be different. So I don't think I can give you a clear answer. But a general spirit we ask all of our youth representatives to embody is to represent the voices of other young people.
Absolutely, that's very valuable, thank you.
Hello, I'm very sorry for the late question. My name is Hussein Boya, I'm from the Gambia. And my question is, as young as you are, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to make a change to how the voice of the youths are heard from a region where youths are not more valuable, where they think youths should not be in the forefront of anything? What advice would you give to people who want to come together to make a change to make sure youth voice are heard from rural areas or some part of the world where they seem to be like less important or less valuable? Thank you.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think we need to be clear first what you're aspiring, right? You need to be clear, and you need to like make a self-assessment whether the topic is, it's executable or not. It's on my perspective, and then you try to find a sponsor, right? It's no matter where you're from. I'm also from Indonesia, a developing country. I spent 27 years there, and I deal with like how the local community perspective on that. It's very uncommon, like to do something like that. But the way I drive, I try to convince I need at least 2 or 3 more people to be in my group. So we have the same vision, same perspective, and we run. Like we looking for fun, looking for collaborations. But if I need to be honest to you that the first year of my organization, I do self-funding with my own budget. So that's kind of challenging at first. But after that, we successfully secured some like funding from organizations, and also I think in your government we also have like a platform, like if you're participating in UN, we have like national selections to the UN ECOSOC or some regional activities. So it is secured in the spots. Like you have to make like good applications, for example, like do some volunteerism will probably strengthen your CVs, and also learn how to to initiate your own NGO, for example, or like small movement. You don't need to go and do something great, but at least you have your community, right? You need to take a look, you assess what's needed there, like whether it's environmental issues or small political issues. So you start from there. I think even in like schools or grants sponsor, they're trying to take a look from the small actions. What did you do first before they support you, both financially or all the resources that you probably need.
Well, I think to also address your question, I would like to highlight sort of the digital interconnected nature of our world. If I was born just, let's say, a few decades earlier, I wouldn't have been able to build the things and build the change that I could have built because we lack the digital technology. But now we live in a world where we have the privilege to connect with people across the world thousands of kilometers away with just a simple click of a button. And so, while even if our local physical community does not provide us with the opportunities to build change, I think it's always important to remember that there's a much larger group, a network of change makers out there online. And if we leverage that effectively, we can actually build incredible change. And even the multilateral bodies are sometimes adopting this trend. For instance, if your NGO isn't based in Geneva or doesn't have an office in Geneva for the United Nations Human Rights Council, you can still deliver pre-recorded interventions. There's other UN meetings that's available to join and intervene online. Like there's various opportunities that allow you to bring advocacy, to bring change to the international, national, and local sectors. And so I think the most important lesson is not to restrict ourselves with a traditional range, that boundary of change that we could create.
Those are super valuable insights. Thank you both. Yeah, it really emphasizes the importance of starting small and drawing from the community that you have, but also not limiting yourself and dreaming big, and thinking outside the box to make things happen. Do we have any final questions, either in person or online? There's an online question. What tools do young people use to make their opinions count?
Well, I think the main tool we use, at least the most universal tool we have, is just our ability to organize into groups. Young people, we are often, at most times, part of institutional frameworks like schools, colleges, and whatnot. And through that, we build strong bonds with many of our peers. And so when you find those like-minded people, that is our tool to change, because politicians, diplomats, and whatnot, the most thing they care about is, to be honest, the will of the people, because you have to care for the people for them to re-elect you or for them to respect your authority as leaders. And so if young people are able to mobilize in masses, these governments that decide policy need to influence the future voters, the future people who will decide their authority and power. And so we have this unique ability to mobilize people in masses, not to mobilize only young people around our community, but to mobilize adults, to mobilize people even younger than us, to mobilize people across the entire spectrum of that global population. And I think that's a very distinct and very powerful tool that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, that's really great. So I met somebody here from yesterday. He's from Mongolia, but I don't spot him today. Oh yeah, it's outside. Yes, he's also a parliament member in Mongolia, so I heard his experience of how he mobilized the voters in his town, as you said. That's really great. So I can answer that. We need young people to participate in politics. We need more young people to get involved in like direct actions, because I'm working in a government like executives, so it's like more restricted for myself to move, right? But if you're getting to a legislative, so we have some action, like some tools, you can do campaign, you can do like fundraising, you can affiliate with political parties, or you can intervene in government directly without protest, right? So I think we need people, we need young people to participate in politics, and even being people mad, like somehow, I think that's the point. Be politician.
Yes, that is so relevant to the topic of this panel and advocating for change and how important participation is in that and what we can do if each individual takes actions and utilizes the tools that they have to make a difference. Any more questions, either in person or online? Yes.
Hi everyone, so I'm George, originally from Mexico. I work in an NGO named Agora. We promote public policies based on peace building, social justice, the Sustainable Development Goals. I am based in New York and I have the privilege to go to UN meetings, debate with decision makers, representatives, etc. And I have been able to meet more youth that go to New York and want to participate and share their causes, convince politicians. However, what we lack is a safe space for those people, like for the youth specifically. So can we talk or come up with an initiative, a protocol, like do we know any mechanism aiming to bring safer spaces for youth, trying to create an inclusive, respectful environment where if anyone feels disrespected or harmed by any situation, because we've faced challenges in previous years when member states, when UN agencies, different stakeholders challenge the integral part of like youth, I would say this, when they are being disrespectful with young people, when they disagree with their positions, with the statements by UN member states, they are being disrespectful. So how can we ensure that youth participate in a safe area?
Well, I thank you very much for your question. And I think the answer to your question is very hard to answer because it's true. Young people often are the victims of reprisals and of ignorance and institutional neglect for just raising their voices and informing politicians and diplomats of their perspectives. It is an objective fact that there are many victims of reprisals. But to address that, it's not something that we can simply change unless we have some groundbreaking movement from not only us as young advocates, but a universal movement from governments, from countries, from intergovernmental organizations, large NGOs. We need that level of groundbreaking movement, a dimensional shift in how we view young youth participation. And I think this is where really that idea of youth tokenization comes in. Young people are not in safe spaces when they engage with their local government, international agencies and such, because those are platforms that are built without considering our unique needs and our unique perspectives. So I think we have to modify these spaces, how these spaces involve stakeholder participation, and how governments view those international spaces.
So it would be by increasing youth participation in decision making to allow them to decide what is the best format in the forums in the event to be inclusive with youth.
Certainly, I think that would be one of the most idealistic answers, right? That governments and UN agencies independently take action about this, but they don't, so we have to sort of push them to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. But also, as a youth, we sometimes feel vulnerable, right? I think first we need to educate ourselves. We need to respect the law. Because I was a law enforcement, so we need to be careful on whatever you post on social media, because you are, whatever you are, to make you safe, right? So at least educate yourself, learn your guidelines, organizations, and then you probably need to also collaborate with this, law enforcement. If something happened with you, like hire some advocates to do prior consultations before you do some action. For example, when you are trying to do like small movement in your city, right? Like campaign, for example, you can ask local police to back up your movement, for example, and also probably you're gonna hire authority to make it safe.
Yes, thank you both. That highlights the importance of both individual and large-scale modifications to current systems to make things easier for youth participation. That will conclude this session on how to advocate for policy change and influence decision makers. Thank you, Jaywon and Cornelis. We very much appreciate your participation and you being here today. So our next session will start at 2:45, and it will be a session titled From Ideas to Impact, Lessons on Community-Driven Projects Around the World. So make sure not to miss that, and we look forward to seeing you back here at 2:45. Thank you.
That was your first time working? Yeah. Good job, really good.